up to the club with fat stacks of cash. I ain't talking about money, stop showing me your ass. I don't want no honeys, I just zone lock and pass. And the Zeus out your extra deck, don't try to crash. Sit down with a smirk and roll up the dice. Take a look at your extra deck, ooh, very nice. A Starlight Rare, well I guess that's the price. And scoop and go to game 2, that's my advice. I'll end on a macro and lock all your back rows. Show me the rock and I'll have to smack those. Can't pop my Arise Heart, the infinite track goes hard under the black rose. Your place is so whack, bro. And the main phase, I don't wanna hear it. Battle? I said solemn, I don't fear it. Lava Golem? Yeah, alright, that'll clear it. And Branded Fusion too, wow, yeah, okay.
Vanishing and locking, I got this in the bag unless you end up drawing Limp, Golem, or evenly matched. And I guess it would also be kind of bad if you see any way to keep playing after that.
Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts. I'm MBT, and this is 10-minute testing. Well, we've put it off as long as we can. Despite my constant naysaying about the power of Kashtira, it just walked away with the YCS, so time to eat crow and overlay some big red boys. Presenting Kashtira.
Money!
So here's the list, and Jesus Christ, look at that spell lineup. What is this, 2011? As always, I'll give you background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck just got a huge redesign, but it's still the #1 place to go for a pack simulator, a card database, and a wealth of strategy articles. I personally use the site to post every 10-minute testing list and every Chalice Line Monthly Top Cut entry. Give it a look at www.ygoprodeck.com. With that, let's crack into Kashtira. Kashtira is Vsauce Starfrost's third foray into the metagame, and its power level rests somewhere between Scareclaw and Tearlament. On the pressured planet Wraithsoth, Vsauce's angriest incarnation has done a little trolling and a lot of galactic colonialism, becoming the all-powerful ruler of realities by merging with his less successful self and siphoning resources off of other planets. Unfortunately, this extremely interesting lore is represented by some of the least interesting cards ever printed. As early as Darkwing Blast, people were sleeving up Hankertops at home in a shell of as many floodgates and level 7 extenders as they could afford after emptying their wallets for these prohibitively expensive cards. The deck was expensive, boring, and largely unsuccessful. And then two things happened. Firstly, Photon Hypernova released. This set contained an unthinkable amount of support for Kashtira, a field spell that defies the boundaries of what you're allowed to put on a card, a spell actually worth searching with Unicorn, and an extremely angry twink that's perfect to put under very Darklaw. Secondly, the ban list was updated. With the ban of Kitkalos, Sprite Elf, and Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, there's not much left to contest this deck. It's no surprise, therefore, that it was the most represented deck both in Swiss and Top Cut of the most recent YCS. You've probably seen this meme online, and I'm pleased to inform you, it gets worse. This deck's uninterrupted game plan is functionally an FTK, locking every zone and preventing the opponent from taking any action, let alone setting up themselves. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up, the Kashtiras. Kashtira Fenrir can be special summoned if you control no monsters, and during the main phase can add a Kashtira monster from your deck to your hand. When it declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can target a face-up card your opponent controls and banish it face down. Kashtira Ogre can be special if you have no monsters, and during the main phase can add a Kashtira Trap from deck to hand. Then if your opponent activates a monster effect or it attacks, you can excavate up to 5 cards from the top of your opponent's deck, banish one face down, and put the rest on the top of the deck in the same order. 2 Kashtira Rise Heart. If you control a Kashtira, this can be special summoned from the hand. Also, you are locked into Xyz monsters. Then during your main phase, if it was normal or special summon this turn, you can banish 1 Kashtira card from your deck and banish the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck face down, making this a 7 in the process. We've got 3 copies of Kashtira Unicorn, which if you control no monsters can be special summoned from the hand, and as an ignition during the main phase, can add a Kashtira spell from your deck to your hand. When this card declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can look at your opponent's extra deck, and if you do, banish a monster from it face down. This is, to me, the most frustrating part of the card. Why do I need to buy 2 Zeuses? Finally, we're on 1 copy of Scareclaw Kashtira. During the main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, banish a Kashtira or Scareclaw from your hand or graveyard. It can attack while in face-up defense position, and if it does, you apply its defense for damage calculation. The effects of any monster that was involved in a battle with a Kashtira or a Scareclaw monster this turn while this card was face-up on the field are negated. Notably, there's an additional Kashtira monster, Tearlament Kashtira, that isn't represented in this list, but it's functionally just an extender and a name like this one. After that, we've got 3 copies of Nibiru, 3 copies of Ash, 3 copies of Book of Moon, 3 copies of Forbidden Chalice, 3 copies of Forbidden Lance, and more Kashtira cards. 3 Birth, which can normal summon a level 7 monster without tributing, and then during your main phase can special summon a non-Xyz Kashtira that's banished during your graveyard. And if your opponent activates a spell card or effect and you control a Kashtira, you can target 3 cards in your opponent's graveyard and banish them face down. Kashtira Theosis. I miss papayas. Can target a Kashtira monster you control, special summon a Kashtira with a different attribute from your deck defense position, and for the rest of the turn, you are locked into Xyz. If it's banished, you can target a banished Kashtira card and add it to your hand, 3 Pot of Prosperity, and 3 Pressured Planet Wraithsoth. When this card is activated, you can add a Kashtira from your deck to your hand. Monsters you control gain 100 attack and defense for each attribute on the field, and if a Shangri-ira you control activates its effect, you can target a card on the field, destroy it. Each of those effects is a once per turn. Finally, we have Terraforming Big Bang, which if a Kashtira Xyz monster is on the field and a player controls 2 or more monsters, they have to banish monsters they control face down until they only control 1, and if it's banished, you can target a Kashtira Xyz monster you control, add one of your Kashtira monsters attached to it to your hand, then you can special summon that monster from your hand, and finally 1 Kashtira Preparations. During either player's turn, you can special summon a Kashtira monster that is banished or in your hand, and if your opponent activates a trap card or effect and you control a Kashtira monster, this card is already face up in the spell and trap card zone, you can look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, banish 1 card from it face down. In the extra, we've got Entis, Garua, Dark Armed, the Dragon of Annihilation, 2 Zeus, 2 Kashtira Rise Heart, which once per turn, if Shangri-Ira has activated its effect, can be Xyz summoned using a Kashtira monster you control as material, and any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Then once per chain, each time a card is banished, you can attach 1 banished card to this card as material, and once per turn you can detach 3 materials from this card, target a card on the field, and banish it face down. Shangri-Ira says during each standby phase, you can special summon a Kashtira monster from your deck, and each time a card your opponent owns and possesses is banished face down, you can choose an unused main monster as spell and trap card zone, and it can't be used while this monster is face up on the field. If it would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach a material instead. We're also playing a Big Eye and a Diabolus the Mind Hacker, followed by Donner, Infinitrack Goliath, Baron de Fleur, and Salaman Great Almirage. In the side, we're on 3 copies of Shifter, 3 copies of Eebly, 2 Darkhold, triple Enemy Controller, triple Forbidden Droplet, and a Harpy's Feather Duster. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first game is up against Dinosaur, though I'll be honest with you, calling what's about to happen a game is maybe a little optimistic. We're going to go first, and our hand looks immaculate. We're going to begin with a copy of Unicorn. We're going to use Unicorn to get a copy of Theosis. We'll activate Theosis to summon a Fenrir from deck, then we'll activate the effect of the Fenrir for an Ogre. After that, we're going to activate the Pressured Planet. We'll use its effect to grab Scareclaw Kashtira, then we'll set a Birth, overlay for a Shangri-Ira, normal the Ogre, and activate its effect. We're going to grab Big Bang here, then activate the effect of the Arise Heart in hand in order to banish from our deck a copy of Preparations. That's going to trigger the effect of the Shangri-Ira, locking 1 zone, and then we'll activate Scareclaw Kashtira to do the Yoinky Spelunky with the Big Bang and get ourselves a copy of Unicorn back to our side of the field. Let's make a second Shangri-Ira and a Diabolus, then trigger the effect of the Diabolus, take a card from our opponent's extra, and trigger both Shangri-Iras and the Diabolus again. We're going to banish 4 cards from the top of our opponent's deck, which will of course trigger the Shangri-Iras again. Good luck with the back row. From here, we should be able to end turn. We'll just make an Arise Heart with this Rise Heart off of Birth afterwards, and then our opponent has exactly 1 thing they are allowed to do before we lock the remainder of their zones. They're going to activate Lost World and normal summon this copy of Soul Eating Oviraptor to grab a miscellaneous source, and that should be all she wrote. From here, we can activate the effect of the Unicorn and banish a card face down. That'll trigger the effect of the Rise Heart and the effect of both Shangri-Iras, locking 2 zones, and the effect of the Diabolus, banishing a ton of cards off the top of our opponent's deck, and in a new chain, activating the effect of the Arise Heart and both Shangri-Iras once again. 9 zones locked, Lost World destroyed, a ton of material under the Arise Heart. Good luck to our opponent, and well played. Our second game is up against Sprite, and this is about as close to counterplay as this deck is going to experience. We're going first, and our hand looks incredible. Once again, we're going to begin with a copy of Unicorn. We'll activate the effect in order to grab a Theosis from deck to hand. Then we'll fire off a Pot of Prosperity, finding off the top. Let's go for the Birth here. Afterwards, we're going to go for the Theosis in order to summon a copy of Fenrir from deck, and then we'll activate the effect of the Fenrir in order to grab from deck to hand a Scareclaw Kashtira. We'll go for the Shangri-Ira and then activate the effect of the Rise Heart in hand, activating its effect to banish a copy of Ogre. I swear we're supposed to banish the Big Bang, but we keep drawing it. We'll go for the Birth here and then activate the effect of the Scareclaw Kashtira, banishing the Big Bang in order to do the Yoinky Spelunky with Shangri-Ira. Afterwards, we're going to activate Birth in order to summon back this copy of Ogre, and then Ogre in order to grab Preparations from deck to hand. We'll go into a second Shangri-Ira and a Diabolus, locking the entire back row of our opponent. I'm feeling incredibly good about this one, and we'll trigger the effect of the Diabolus in sequence in order to do the Shangri-Ira shuffle again. We're going to set this Preparations and proceed to end step, at which point our opponent's going to reveal that they've outskilled us. They've got the Nibiru in hand, and well, yeah, that's all this deck really does. Our opponent's going to draw for turn, and this should be all she wrote. They're going to normal summon a copy of Nimble Beaver. That's going to summon a Nimble Angler from deck, special summon a Sprite Blue, and then afterwards they will grab a Jet. They're going to overlay for a Gigantic Sprite, and that was the 4th summon. You're kidding me. They're going to go into a Carrot and a Jet. They'll trigger the effect of the Jet in order to grab a Gamma Burst, overlay for an Onibimaru, then activate that effect in order to banish the Primal Being token. They'll get in for what I expect is under lethal until I read the Gamma Burst text. Okay, well, so it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's playing the deck that Kashtira encountered in the finals of the most recent YCS, Labyrinth. And just like in finals, they've lost the die roll. So let's begin with the copy of Unicorn. We'll activate the effect of the Unicorn on field in order to get an Atheosis from deck, and then we'll fire off the Theosis in order to grab a Fenrir. After that, we're going to activate the effect of the Fenrir in order to grab from deck to hand a copy of Rise Heart, then we'll overlay for a Shangri-ira, use the effect of the Rise Heart, and finally, we get to banish a Big Bang. We're going to trigger the effect of the Shangri-ira here to lock an opponent's zone, and the effect of the Big Bang in order to cycle back this copy of Fenrir. Afterwards, we're going to activate Pot of Prosperity and find off the top. Okay, there's actually a decision involved here. I guess we'll take the Lance. We're going to overlay for a copy of Diabolus here, then activate the effect in order to banish a card from our opponent's extra and get locking 2 additional zones. We'll trigger the effect of the Diabolus and the Shangri-ira in sequence before we activate Birth and use its effect to bring back this copy of Rise Heart, overlaying for a Rise Heart, setting 1, and passing. Our opponent will draw, and after we resolve the effect of our Shangri-ira, set 2 and pass. Boy, do I love this format. We'll draw for turn. We'll activate the effect of the Shangri-ira. They'll activate Skill Drain. We're going to Forbidden Lance our copy of a Rise Heart because this kind of does everything. We'll go for a Rise Heart here in order to take one of the tucked cards back under it. Then we'll activate Book of Moon, triggering a Rise Heart again in order to take a 3rd card, then activating a Rise Heart's effect in order to pop that Skill Drain. Afterwards, we're going to activate Shangri-ira in order to get that back row zone locked, and Diabolus and a Rise Heart and Shangri-ira in sequence. Now we can start going for main monster zones. We'll get a couple of those, and all we have to chase out at this position is just that back row. I expect it's probably like Big Welcome or something. We'll go for Fenrir for a copy of Ogre, which we will normal, then activate the effect of the Ogre in order to grab a Preparations before going to battle. We'll get in, our opponent will welcome Labyrinth, and unfortunately for them, we have the Ash Blossom. Well, what a well-played and interesting game that one was. So it's time for game 2, and our hand looks pretty good. Our opponent's going to begin with a copy of Pot of Duality. They're going to find off the top. Oh, God. Going to be one of those games, will it? They're going to go for a Prosperity after adding the Eradicator Epidemic Virus from deck to hand. Off the Prosperity, they are going to take an Ariana. They'll add the Ariana to hand. They're going to normal summon it, and then activate the effect in order to grab a Welcome Labyrinth. After that, they are going to set 5 and pass, a time-honored tradition. We're going to draw for turn, and in draw phase, they're going to activate Welcome Labyrinth. That's the only one I know about it, so I fire off the Ash Blossom here, but the big Welcome will get a lovely Labyrinth to their side of the field, which they can then tribute for Eradicator Calling spell. Well, they not only get to take a card out of our hand, they get to take all the spells as well, so let's just set up Preparations and hope for the best. They're going to go for Trap Trick and End Phase, and yeah, well, this was a fun one. They're going to normal summon this copy of Ariana, and I feel like we probably don't need to see this one out. They'll activate the effect of Lovely Lady, and let's scoop it up. So it's time for that all-important Game 3, and yeah, this hand ought to do it. We're going to begin with a copy of Unicorn. We'll activate the effect of the Unicorn in order to grab from deck to hand a copy of Kashtira Birth. Then we're going to normal summon an Evely, giving it to our opponent so that they can no longer special summon. That should insulate us against Nibiru for the rest of the turn, and then we'll go for Birth into an Atheosis. We'll go for the effect of the Fenrir in order to grab from deck to hand a copy of Rise Heart. We're going to go for a Shangri-ira, and then the effect of the Rise Heart in order to summon itself, banishing an Ogre. We are going to have to do this a little differently because, of course, we used our normal already, but we're going to bring back the Ogre, activate the Ogre effect in order to grab a Big Bang, then activate Scareclaw Kashtira, banishing the Big Bang to do the Yoinky Splunky, and now we should have enough material on our side of the field to go into a second Shangri-ira and a Diabolus. Well, enjoy this trap deck. We are going to block all of your back row. Both Shangri-iras trigger once. We'll trigger the effect of the Diabolus, and after we banish more cards, they're going to trigger again on a new chain. All back row bonked, and a copy of Nightmare Corruptor Evely. Excellent. In standby, we're going to get a copy of Fenrir. They do play the Lingaribo, but that's okay. We don't care at this position. They'll pass back to us, and we should be able to clean it up. But let's BM just a little bit. We'll go for Shangri-ira for a Unicorn here, and then we'll overlay for a copy of a Rise Heart. We'll activate the effect of the Fenrir in order to grab a copy of Rise Heart before going for a Diabolus, triggering the effect of the Rise Heart and both Shangri-iras. We're going to lock 2 of our opponent's zones. After that, we are going to equip a card to this Rise Heart, then activate the Rise Heart effect again for a copy of Big Bang underneath it. We'll go for Birth and for a Rise Heart in order to destroy this Lingaribo, triggering the effect of the Rise Heart and the effect of the Shangri-ira and the effect of the Shangri-ira. We are down to 1, ladies and gentlemen. After that, we are going to go ahead and go to the battle phase, activate the effect of the Ogre, which is going to banish 1 card from the top of our opponent's deck face down, and should be all she wrote. We're going to trigger the effect of the Shangri-ira to lock off the last remaining zone, and forget about it, one of our own as well. Oh joy. Boy, do I love Yu-Gi-Oh! So we're back with the deck, and God, I wish my opinion had changed, but it still feels like a pushed mess that's good exclusively because everything else got hit harder. Maybe I've been permanently ruined by Tier Lament. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. This deck is explosive and consistent. Drawing Unicorn is a 1-card combo on its own, but you can get creative with combinations of names or Theosis or Birth. 2, the full combo is game winning. Locking out every spell trap zone and most main monster zones is one of the most powerful things you can do turn 1 outside of literally Cannon Soldier FDKing. And 3, your matchup spread is immaculate. You'll always have knowledge of your opponent's deck from the get, given the extra deck rip, so you can lock back row versus Labyrinth and mains versus everything else. You're unkillable macro plus Trident, kind of solos against Rogue. And the cons. 1, the out. Nibiru is brutal. Playing around it leaves you with an extremely low power board that gets easily crushed by most decks, but if your opponent has it, you literally lose on the spot. 2, if your board gets broken, it's nearly impossible to get back into the game. You commit a lot of resources into your setup, so it's basically birth or bust. And 3, a majority of the games you play are extremely one-sided. These non-games where you either zone lock or get Nibiru'd are boring. It has skill expression and a few combo routes, but the ceiling is really low since you're essentially FTKing your opponent most of the time. All in all, I'm still not convinced this is the capital B best deck, but if it is, maybe the Act Man was right after all. Thanks so much for watching. I'd like to give a quick shout out to my patrons, specifically Elena Tincher, Alex Dominguez, Alex Perea, Allison Elliott, Brett Henry, Bizen Queen, Chaotic Meatball, Crispy, Da Bears, DJ Elephant, Grant Curry, John Piet, Jordan Kuntz, King Magic Ruler, Knight Mary, Lookstone, Materiality, MBT Play Madolce, Melissa Sosi, Mike Carlotti, NH6574, Rose Lapine, Roos Mosquito, Solar Flare, Troy Says By Erasure is Gay, Vincent Storm, Wonder Waffle, and Yor. I couldn't have done it without you.